Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home. Hey friends, we need your help. In order to help keep this show going, we need to hear back from you. Please take some time and check out our evaluation. Let us know if you like the show, and especially let us know if you've used any of the information you've gained from our show. Once again, you can reach us directly. You can call Karen at 304-234-3673. That's 304-234-3673. Or you can reach Dan at 740-695-1455. That's 740-695-1455.
Hello, Karen.
Hey, Dan. Today, we wanted to talk about something that happens any time of year during all sorts of temperatures, and that's erosion.
Oh, it's such a terrible word, Karen. No, it is a really bad thing.
It can be.
Now that we're going into winter, one of the worst things you can do to soil is to leave it bare.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you think you're cleaning things up, like, some people like to harvest, till, and then leave it to the spring. But like, that's not a good practice. You can't leave it bare. You don't necessarily need to plant a cover crop, but you can't leave it bare.
Right. I mean, that came about for people, trying to manage soil-borne diseases. And so the idea for a long time was to just get those plants out of there so that they can't send those spores back into the soil to increase the potential population of those soil-borne diseases. And that's still a good idea. We're not telling you that you should leave your diseased plants in your garden. But if you are taking them out, either don't till, leave your soil structure as is, or cover that soil, or both, leave it as is and cover it. The whole point is to make sure that it is not exposed to wind and water.
Right. A burn down with a pesticide, as long as you leave residual there, or residue, excuse me.
Yeah.
That might be maybe not the best, but it's something, right?
Because you're leaving the roots there.
You're leaving the roots there. You're leaving that residue from the plant that died, the leaves and the stems that will kind of decompose over winter as well. But you want to do something. You don't want to just leave it open.
You could do a burn down with fire too.
That's a literal burn down. Yeah.
Yeah, it is fire season. So make sure you're reaching out to your local forestry officials to find out if it is okay to burn, to get a burn permit should you need one. And of course, make sure that you are implementing all strategies to prevent that fire from spreading into a nearby forest. So we don't always recommend that, but sometimes it is an effective way to help rejuvenate a certain area and help to control certain species.
You can do that. You're right. The roots would stay in, but you wouldn't be left much of a crop residue up top, though.
That's true.
If you gave it a good burn. So then, mulch is something you can do. A lot of people, even if you have any kind of bedding, with straw and manure, like combinations, just something that will give it some texture and like biomass on top.
Yeah.
So that the wind, right? We talk about wind. Wind and water are the two big eroders.
Mm-hmm.
Not really sure which one's worse. People argue that water is probably worse because it kind of seems to carry soil faster, does gain momentum. But wind, even though you probably don't see it, and it's probably more of an even type of erosion, you get heavy winds and dry soil.
Well, you get the dust bowl.
It's like the leaf blower in a dusty room.
Right? Yeah. I mean, you think about going back to the last time we were in the 20s and we talk about the Dust Bowl and all of that wind erosion, right?
Wait, 20? We are in the 20s. We're in the 2020s.
I know, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, I had to think about that for a second. Yeah, it was the previous 20s.
Yeah. And so, you think about the Dust Bowl and the huge detriment that had. It took away all of those healthy soils and all of that productive land and just stripped it bare so that you had that subsoil which didn't have much nutrient value for plants, and it just had a really hard time growing things. And so you had farms by the dozens and by the hundreds that just died because they couldn't grow anything. And so we don't want to repeat that. So we want to keep our topsoil where it is. It takes a long time to create topsoil. And so if you have good topsoil, you want to protect it.
Yeah, and by long time, let's put it in perspective. We're talking about hundreds of years.
Well, I mean, you can build a substitute topsoil in about 7 years if you're adding enough organic matter. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like with compost and organic. Gotcha. Yeah.
But still, that's 7 years. That's still time.
And you're probably not producing it faster than it's eroding.
Yeah, if you're not protecting it. And, we look at our broader scale of things, and you look at the highways that are going in and the construction that's happening as shopping centers expand and things like that. All of those things are disturbing our topsoil, and you're getting erosion from them. And we're also losing the ability of that land to absorb rainwater. And so making sure you have healthy soils is also helpful to reduce and manage flood conditions. So we really all need to be working together to make sure that we're not having compacted soil or bare soil, and that we are doing everything we can to help increase the ability of those soils to function and absorb moisture.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, there was a lot there, and I mean, all that's right. And we don't want to say that, tillage is still a major part of agriculture. It does provide a lot of benefits, but there's deep full tillage, and then there's more conservation based tillage. One of the NRCS recommendations from USDA is a conservation tillage that would leave 30% or more of crop residue. So you got something there so that when the wind does blow, it's kind of holding that soil in place.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, no-till is going to be the ideal situation where you'll harvest, you'll have the crop residue, and then you're not going to disturb anything. You'll have the roots there, and then you're just planting directly in there. And it just keeps adding up. You keep building up that organic matter up top.
Right.
Strip till is another way to do it. Tilling so that you have the tilled strip and a non-tilled strip, a tilled strip and a non-tilled strip. And that will help if there is kind of some erosion happening in there. Hopefully the residue in a non-tilled strip will kind of catch it. But it slows down water, helps break the wind, and reduces erosion.
Yeah, and strip tilling is really effective when you start working on a slope. And so if you are on a grade, let's say you have a 10% slope to your field, which is not unheard of in this bumpier area, and you are going across the grade so that your strips are kind of making a horizontal line across the hillside, that's going to do a lot to help slow down that rainwater as it goes down, while still giving you that ability to do your tillage style planting.
And you can incorporate nutrients in this manner as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and a lot of times we talk about surface application of manures, and we talk about nutrient management and how in a way it's better to incorporate the manure. That way it's kind of bound to the soil more.
Right.
And then strip tillage is just a great way to do something like that, where you are kind of slowing down that erosion and that surface runoff, but you're also incorporating at the same time. So
right.
there are creative solutions to many practices that do benefit farmers.
Right. And the same goes for lime applications and biochar applications. Those typically work best when they're tilled into the soil. You'll get a faster response and they won't blow away in the wind. So there are times where tillage is really a big deal. And so if you aren't using a complete no-till system, consider doing this type of tillage where you're just strip tilling and not doing the entire field. That can also help to reduce your application, right? Because you're not doing the entire field, you're just doing the planting zone.
And conservation tillage, where you're actually allowing a lot more residue, 30% or greater, to be on the surface.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which will decompose and start adding to that as well, but just not leaving it bare and loose.
Right.
That's going to get you in trouble, especially kind of going into the fall winter time frame when there are winter annuals that are germinating now, but you're still going to have a lot of bare spots and you're going to have heavy winds because that's what happens in the winter. If it's a windy, dry winter like last year, that's the worst recipe you can have for bare soil.
That's right. And other things you could do. You can have filter strips, right? So every so often you can install a grassy strip that absorbs the soil particles that are coming off of your field. And these are most important and most commonly seen around riparian buffer zones, right? So if you have a stream that's going through your field or a drainage line that's going through your field, making sure that you have those wider buffer strips of grass or even small shrubs, things like that, you can actually absorb a lot of the soil runoff, but also capture a lot of the nutrient runoff so you're not losing as many of your fertilizers.
Right. And it's working both ways. You're stabilizing the soil around the stream itself that's moving. So there's your water eroder. That's kind of a funny way to say that, but you understand what I'm saying. Right. But you're also stabilizing that bank. It's not only capturing what's running off the field into the the agricultural ditch or the stream, but it's also the filter strips are going to catch nutrients. It's going to catch sedimentation coming off the fields, and it's going to hold everything in place so that it's not working both ways where, the stream's eroding out and the fields are eroding into the stream. And before you know it, when they meet, you've lost feet. But square footage, when you're talking about 2-3 feet from a field, can be very, very large.
Yeah, when you're looking at stream bank erosions, which is I think where you're going with this, you can lose a significant amount of usable surface area. Now, some of that erosion could be due to, just past alluvial deposits, but some of it is related to the speed of the water moving through and making sure you have adequate buffer areas on the sides of those streams really can make a big difference as to whether or not the soil in the stream stays where it needs to be. Also, think about having sediment in those streams that's floating down. It really impacts the quality of that water. Having floating sediment makes it harder for the animals that live in the water to obtain oxygen, because the sediment grabs onto it, won't let it go. And it's harder for them to filter that sediment-filled water over their gills and such. So there's a lot of compounding problems that come from erosion beyond just the loss of your arable land. It really impacts the fish habitat and thus our aquatic food system, right? And so I'm a big fan of fish. We eat a lot of fish, and I really would like to keep those aquatic food systems healthy because they really are one of the foundational food systems for the entire earth. So it's really important that we maintain our water quality by keeping sediment out of it and keeping those excess nutrients out as well. So we don't have those algal blooms and the toxic algae and, all of those issues associated with that. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can upstream so that we don't have problems downstream.
And those algae blooms aren't just in they're not just in the Gulf. Uh-huh. They're not just up in Lake Erie. They're also in the Ohio River. they happen locally. They could be
in farm ponds. They happen
at the park, at the farm pond. Yeah, I was thinking like, a state park or something even, but
oh, that's true. Yeah.
it will significantly help with that. You think just a small 20-acre farm or something, whatever.
Right.
But think about if everybody did a little bit, how much it would go just in the long run. We think about the impacts that we're having on the Gulf. All those things that we're seeing on the Gulf are probably happening locally as well. So just by doing something locally that you get a direct benefit from, you're going to impact generations down the road and people for hundreds of miles all the way to the Gulf at this point.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
It really is.
And, it's something that we really need to think about. And, just if you have just a garden too, I'm not saying, talking about a lot of nutrient runoff from a garden, but gardens are typically pretty heavy in nutrients, whether it's a raised bed or you just have a garden that you till that's fenced in, keeps the deer out, a very successful garden. But like, even at that level, we talk about covering your soil. It doesn't necessarily have to be a natural organic type cover. You don't need necessarily a cover crop. You don't need necessarily plant residue, manures, with bedding, let's say, as an example. But it could just be like a cover.
It could be a tarp.
If you're able to just tarp over a raised bed, you've taken care of a lot of the winds, and you're going to keep the weeds down. It's going to hold a lot of that organic matter. A lot of things are going to decompose into it. It's actually a very good thing to do. I would say maybe not quite as good as a cover crop, but much better than leaving it bare.
Oh, yeah, indeed. So even if you're just like raking up the leaves from your yard and putting them on your garden bed, that is such a great step. And if you can leave them to decompose, like we talked about on a previous show, making sure they stick around for 2 years to get more fireflies.
Yeah, the firefly habitat.
And less slugs. Woohoo! Double win there.
That is a major win, especially with sunflowers in my experience.
So yeah, there's lots of reasons to do this kind of thing, but sometimes people get stuck, especially like if, let's say you have a forest road or a farm road where you have bare soil and you're like, okay, well now what do I do? Because we have this logging job, or, I need this farm road to go up to the upper paddock. How do we build those roads so that we have less erosion on those? Because they can be significant contributors to our to sedimentation in our streams. So making sure that you are following good forest road construction techniques is a really important step. So, you want to make sure that no road is ever greater than 20% slope. And, one of the easiest to maintain things in a forest or farm road that you can also drive on fairly easily is a broad-based dip. And so this is basically an area where the slope of the road surface reverses for a little bit. So you're going downhill and then you go in this broad-based dip and it's kind of uphill a little bit. And what that does is you slope it outward so that the water collects in this space. It slows down. It goes off of your road, and then you can keep on going down the road. So it breaks up the speed of the water. It doesn't allow it to collect as much energy. Because the faster the water goes, the more energy it has, the more sediment it can pick up. And so when you have these broad-based dips, it slows that water down, gets it off of the road. But if they're not constructed properly, sometimes what you get is a broad-based dip with a big channel in the center of it, or a big puddle in the center of it, where the water hasn't drained or is drained off too quickly. So again, you have to make sure, like, broad-based dips do not work on any road that is greater than 10% slope. So if you're coming off a steep hillside, this isn't the correct installation. But if you have a slope of less than 10% or a grade of less than 10%, you can use a broad-based dip. And Basically, they're about 20-foot long, and you're going to put them about 100 feet apart in your roads. So you want to make sure that outslope is about 2 to 3% in the lowest portion of the dip, and so that way it can move it out. And of course, you want to make sure that you are installing a good amount of crushed stone to make sure that it is, again, those stones are going to grab that soil and hold it in place, just like a cover crop would do in a farm field. So in this case, since you're driving on it, plants aren't going to survive too well, right? So you want to make sure that you have stone in place and riprap below the dip to help collect it. And riprap is basically just bigger rocks.
Yeah, I was just waiting to jump in on that. Larger stones on the sides where you're not driving through will just help stabilize everything. We'll hold that soil down. We'll slow down the water. It'll actually hold your road intact.
It's an important investment.
Sometimes with gravel, I'm going to say we forget that there's different sizes, but we're just so used to working with, certain size, that we can drive on that doesn't puncture tires or anything. But there is definitely a use for larger stones, like on the sides to stabilize. It'll be there longer. It'll hold better. It'll slow down the water better. It'll actually keep the gravel that you want on the road to stay on the road. So there is some strategy in using larger stone in the appropriate areas to slow down water and stabilize everything else.
Right. Yeah. And also, keep in mind that while I said earlier that this is a low maintenance option, it's not a no maintenance option. You do need to go back and regrade every so often to keep it from rutting and to help maintain the proper slopes inside this water control technique.
Yeah, I don't know how we ended up like going from agriculture to civil engineering.
Well, it's all connected,
It's like farmers end up with a lot of different skills.
This is true. Yeah. And you know what? If you don't have these skills and you need this done on your property, hire someone who does have the skills and the proper equipment, because you'll find out that in the long run, it's going to save you time, headaches, and money if you get a professional who knows what they're doing versus trying to do it yourself. And there's a lot of cost share programs out there that can help you install roads and maintain them, and especially from the focus of keeping erosion to a minimum. So look into cost share programs to help install proper roads and to reduce erosion. And also look into cost share programs for cover cropping and for installing stream buffers and things like that. There is funding out there to help support these practices because of things like the Dust Bowl, where we learned that it's a really bad idea to get rid of our topsoil.
Yeah, and besides, building roads and doing row crops, if you are a livestock producer, just keeping that animal outside the stream is also going to be huge. Large animals like cattle, if they're using the stream as a water source, if they're going into the stream, there's so much disturbance there. And depending on how much they're utilizing it, you might think, oh, well, I don't let my animals in one place too long, but things can happen. It's just you get busy, emergencies happen, and your animals might overgraze a certain area. And if they have access to the stream, they might do a lot more damage than you anticipated. So fencing, if they need to have that access, even just putting rocks in there, just like we were talking about with roads, that also stabilizes animal crossings, that stabilizes animal usage of the stream itself. So there's just many different ways you can stabilize the stream, no matter what you're doing in your farm, whether it's animals or row crops. We talked about the conservation tillage, strip tillage. Everybody has a different way that they can keep the soil in place. It doesn't always have to be cover crops. It can just be, like you were saying, a tarp over something if it's a smaller area. The soil is a very precious commodity, and we just have to take care of it if everybody takes care of a little bit, it really goes a long way. And you'll see the difference locally as well. So it's not like you're not going to benefit immediately from a couple years of doing certain practices and keeping your water clean and your soil intact.
Yes, very, 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 very true. And I want to let you all know about a website that is out there. It's actually at Ohio State's website. It's soilhealth.osu.edu. Or if you can search soil health, erosion control, Ohio State, it'll come up. And it's a really great website that talks about erosion control. It gives you some key strategies and best management practices to address erosion. And it talks about it from different concerns. Like, okay, I have rill erosion, or I have gully erosion. So I've got this big gully that's cutting through my farm field. What do I do? Well, here's a couple options for you. And it goes into a lot of great depth once you click on what you're interested in. And so you're not bombarded right away with all of the information up front. So you can kind of go through little by little and figure out what's going to work best for you. And as always, reach out to your local service providers, conservation districts, NRCS, extension offices, forestry services, your environmental protection. There are so many agencies that want to make sure that we are reducing erosion and protecting our waterways, that there is help for you somewhere. And so please reach out and get your questions answered. Even if you just have a yard, there are things you can do to help reduce water pollution and protect your grounds from erosion and protect your soil health. Hey friends, we need your help. In order to help keep this show going, we need to hear back from you. Please take some time and check out our evaluation. Let us know if you like the show, and especially let us know if you've used any of the information you've gained from our show. Once again, you can reach us directly. You can call Karen at 304-234-3673. That's 304-234-3673. Or you can reach Dan at 740-695-1455. That's 740-695-1455. Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.